The night was quiet in Brookville. Streetlights cast a golden glow on empty roads and a soft wind rustled through the trees. Detective Marcus Reed was on his routine patrol, his car moving slowly along the deserted streets. He had been working the night shift for years, and although he had seen many strange things, tonight felt ordinary, almost peaceful. Then something caught his attention. A sleek black sedan appeared ahead, moving a little faster than the speed limit. Marcus's hand instinctively moved to the siren. He knew it was his duty to ensure safety, but part of him also recognized the patterns of careless drivers. He flicked on the lights and signaled the car to pull over. The sedan slowed down immediately and carefully pulled to the side of the road. Marcus parked behind it, stepped out of his patrol car, and walked toward the driver. His boots clicked against the asphalt. He could feel the tension building inside him, a mix of authority and the instinctive judgment that often came with the badge. The driver rolled down the window and Marcus's eyes met a calm, steady gaze. "Good evening, sir. Do you know why I stopped you?" Marcus asked, trying to keep his tone professional, though there was a slight edge of suspicion in his voice. The man in the sedan remained calm. "I might, officer. Did I exceed the speed limit?" His voice was polite, almost serene, and there was a quiet confidence in his demeanor. Marcus frowned, feeling a mix of relief and irritation. "Yes, you were going a little over the limit, but I also need to ask where you are headed at this hour. It is late and people should be careful." The driver nodded, still calm. "I am on my way home from work. I understand your caution. I have nothing to hide and would like to cooperate fully." Marcus noticed the man's careful choice of words, the clarity in his voice, and the politeness in his expression. It made him hesitate for a moment. He was trained to be cautious, but he also knew that sometimes his instincts could be influenced by assumptions. The man was African American, and though Marcus was not proud of it, he realized his own mind had already started judging before he knew the full story. He took a deep breath, trying to push the thought aside. "May I see your license and registration?" he asked, keeping his tone formal. The man, who introduced himself as Daniel Owens, reached for his wallet and handed over the documents. His movements were precise, careful, and confident. Marcus took the papers, his eyes scanning the information. As he walked back to his patrol car, the silence between them felt heavy, almost tense. Sitting in his car, Marcus began typing the information into his system. His fingers moved quickly across the keys, but something unusual caught his eye. The name on the screen, Daniel Owens, had a high-level security clearance associated with it. Marcus paused and blinked, double-checking the letters and numbers. The system displayed more information. Daniel Owens was listed as the head of internal affairs for the city police department. Marcus leaned back in his seat, feeling a sudden jolt of surprise. He stared at the screen, trying to process what he had just learned. The calm, polite man he had been ready to judge was not only a responsible citizen, but he also held one of the most important positions in law enforcement. Marcus felt a knot of guilt tighten in his stomach. He had almost acted unfairly, based on assumptions that had no foundation. He realized that he needed to handle the situation carefully, not only because Daniel was a senior officer, but also because respect and fairness mattered more than proving authority in the moment. He approached Daniel again, his expression more controlled now, though his mind was racing. "Sir, I need to clarify something," Marcus said, keeping his voice steady. "I see here that you are head of internal affairs. That is an important position." Daniel smiled slightly, his composure unwavering. "Yes, officer. I oversee investigations into police conduct and ensure that all rules and procedures are followed correctly. I understand stops like this are routine, and I am happy to cooperate." Marcus nodded, feeling a wave of relief mixed with embarrassment. He had almost let his assumptions cloud his judgment, and now he understood the importance of keeping an open mind. He realized that his role as a detective was not just to enforce the law, but to ensure fairness and respect for everyone, regardless of background. Daniel remained calm, sensing Marcus's inner conflict. "Officer, I know that night shifts can be stressful," he said. "I appreciate your caution, but it is important to treat each person with fairness. Respect builds trust, and trust makes work easier for everyone." Marcus listened, taking in every word. He had spent years patrolling the streets, but he had never felt this personal connection to a moment of learning. He knew that Daniel's calm and respectful approach was a lesson in itself. After a pause, Marcus finally spoke, his voice sincere. "I realize now that I almost made a mistake. I judged you before knowing the facts, and that was unfair. I am sorry for that." Daniel nodded, his expression approving but still composed. Acknowledging it is the first step. What matters is that we all learn and improve. I hope this can be a positive experience for you. Marcus felt a mix of humility and determination. He had learned an important lesson tonight, one that would stay with him for the rest of his career. He knew that assumptions were dangerous, but acknowledgement and growth were possible. He watched as Daniel returned to his car, started the engine, and drove off smoothly, leaving Marcus standing under the streetlights. The calm hum of the city felt different now, filled with reflection and the promise of change. Marcus stayed by his patrol car for a moment, taking in the night. He knew that the streets were quiet tonight, but the lesson he had learned would echo loudly in his mind for years to come. From this moment, he promised himself to approach every stop with fairness, patience, and respect, knowing that each encounter was a chance to learn, not judge. The next morning, Detective Marcus Reed arrived at the station earlier than usual. The sunlight poured through the tall windows, illuminating the rows of desks and the quiet buzz of early activity. He felt a sense of urgency, but not the usual kind that came from chasing suspects or responding to emergencies. This urgency was different. It was personal. It came from the weight of last night's encounter with Daniel Owens, the calm man he had nearly judged unfairly. Marcus walked past his fellow officers, nodding politely but not stopping for conversation. His mind replayed the traffic stop over and over. He thought about the way he had approached Daniel's car, the assumptions he had allowed to influence his actions, and the sudden shift in his awareness when he realized Daniel's position. Every detail seemed sharper in his memory, as if the night had been etched into his mind with unusual clarity. He reached his desk and pulled out a notebook. Marcus often used it to jot down notes from investigations, but today it served a different purpose. He wrote the date at the top, then began recording his thoughts. First, he noted the facts of the stop: the time, the location, the speed, and Daniel's calm compliance. Then, he wrote about his reaction, the initial suspicion, the judgment, and finally, the shock of discovering Daniel's identity. As he wrote, Marcus began to notice patterns in his own behavior. Over the years, he had stopped drivers quickly, made split-second decisions, and sometimes allowed personal biases to influence his actions. Most of the time, it had not caused serious harm. But tonight, he realized it could have. If Daniel had reacted differently, if he had been less patient, Marcus might have escalated a situation unnecessarily. That thought made his stomach tighten. Marcus leaned back in his chair, rubbing his forehead. He realized that this was not just about a single stop. It was about his approach to his work and the responsibility he carried as a law enforcement officer. Daniel Owens had shown patience, composure, and professionalism, even when Marcus had almost allowed bias to dictate his actions. That had been a lesson, one that Marcus could not ignore. As the morning progressed, Marcus attended the daily briefing. Sergeant Lee stood at the front of the room, reviewing assignments for the day. Marcus noticed how easily the other officers followed orders, the way they trusted the chain of command. He wondered how many of them, like him, had moments where judgment was clouded by assumptions. The thought made him more determined to change. After the briefing, Marcus approached Sergeant Lee privately. "Sir, I need to discuss something from last night," he said. Sergeant Lee motioned for him to sit in a quiet corner. Marcus recounted the traffic stop in detail, including the revelation that Daniel Owens was the head of internal affairs and the feelings it stirred in him. Sergeant Lee listened attentively, nodding as Marcus spoke. "Marcus, recognizing a mistake is the first step toward improvement," he said. "It shows self-awareness. Many officers would not admit that they allowed bias to influence their judgment. You have a chance to turn this into a lesson for yourself and others." Marcus felt a small sense of relief, but he also felt the weight of responsibility. He knew that acknowledgement alone was not enough. He had to act differently moving forward. The encounter had given him clarity, but now it was time to apply it. Later in the day, Marcus reviewed the police department's training materials on bias, fairness, and community interaction. He read case studies, statistics, and guidelines on how officers could approach situations objectively. Every page reminded him of the importance of patience, respect, and fairness. He realized that the lessons from last night were part of a larger responsibility, to uphold justice not only through rules, but through the way he treated every person he encountered. During his afternoon patrol, Marcus noticed small details he had overlooked before. A young man crossing the street, an elderly woman walking her dog, a delivery driver pausing at a stop sign. All became reminders of the importance of awareness and fairness. He thought about Daniel Owens's calm demeanor and how it had diffused tension instead of escalating it. Marcus wanted to emulate that calm, that thoughtful approach in his own work. The day wore on, but Marcus could not shake the encounter from his mind. By evening, he returned to the station and spoke with a few colleagues he trusted, carefully explaining the lessons he had learned. His openness surprised some of them, but it also sparked reflection. The officers listened, asked questions, and shared their own experiences. Marcus realized that learning from mistakes could spread understanding and improvement beyond just one individual. When the shift ended, Marcus stepped outside, feeling the cool evening breeze on his face. The city lights glimmered, reflecting off the streets. He thought about Daniel Owens again, about the calm professionalism and patience he had shown. Marcus understood that respect and fairness were more than ideals. They were actions, choices made every day in every interaction. As he walked to his patrol car, Marcus made a silent promise to himself. He would not forget this night. He would carry the lesson forward in every stop, every conversation, and every decision. He understood now that integrity was not measured by authority or power, but by the ability to act fairly, even when judgment was challenging. The encounter had started as a simple traffic stop, but for Marcus it had become a turning point. He had glimpsed the consequences of bias, the importance of reflection, and the power of patience and respect. That realization would guide him, shaping him into a more thoughtful officer, someone who could approach each situation with fairness and clarity. Tonight, as Marcus sat in his patrol car, ready to continue his watch over the quiet streets, he felt a sense of purpose. The night was no longer just a routine shift. It was a chance to be better, to act with integrity, and to carry forward the lessons learned from Daniel Owens. Marcus knew the journey ahead would not be easy, but he also knew it was the right path. The night air had a crisp quality as Detective Marcus Reed watched the black sedan disappear into the distance. The hum of his patrol car engine seemed louder now, echoing his thoughts. He leaned back in his seat, staring at the dashboard lights, trying to process the unexpected revelation. Daniel Owens, the calm man he had just stopped, was not just an ordinary citizen. He was the head of internal affairs for the city police. Marcus felt a mix of relief, guilt, and uncertainty that he had never experienced on a routine night patrol before. For years, Marcus had relied on instincts developed over long nights on the streets. He had seen speeding cars, suspicious behavior, and sometimes real danger. But he had also seen the harm that assumptions could cause. Tonight, he realized how quickly his own mind had jumped to conclusions. He had almost let personal biases influence his professional judgment. The thought weighed heavily on him. Marcus began to replay the encounter in his mind. Daniel had been calm, polite, and respectful. Every movement had been precise, every word carefully chosen. Marcus could see now that Daniel's composure was not just professionalism, but also a reflection of his experience and intelligence. He had been ready to treat the situation with suspicion, yet Daniel had handled it with patience and dignity. Marcus realized he had much to learn from this encounter. As he continued his patrol, Marcus kept thinking about the position Daniel held. Internal Affairs was responsible for ensuring that police officers acted according to the rules and regulations. They investigated complaints, reviewed conduct, and ensured accountability within the force. Marcus knew that this department held significant authority, and realizing that he had almost treated its head unfairly made him uneasy. The tension in Marcus's chest began to build. He drove slowly through familiar streets, trying to calm his mind. The quiet neighborhood seemed ordinary, yet every street corner now felt like a reminder of the responsibility he carried. He could no longer ignore the truth. Prejudice, even unconscious, had nearly guided his actions tonight. Marcus took a deep breath and reminded himself that reflection was necessary. A mistake acknowledged could become a lesson, and a lesson could become a chance to grow. Later, as he returned to the police station, Marcus couldn't shake the encounter from his mind. The fluorescent lights inside the building felt harsh after the calm night outside, but they also symbolized clarity. He needed to report what had happened. Not just the traffic stop, but also the realization of his own bias. Marcus knew that transparency with colleagues could prevent future mistakes and encourage a culture of learning. Marcus made his way to the break room, grabbing a cup of coffee as he tried to gather his thoughts. He thought about how Daniel had handled himself. Calm, patient, and professional. Qualities Marcus admired but often struggled to fully emulate under pressure. Daniel's actions reminded him that authority was not only about power, but also about restraint and fairness. Marcus realized that he had a responsibility to uphold these qualities as well. As he sipped the coffee, he recalled the small things Daniel had said. Words like fairness, trust, and respect echoed in his mind. Marcus reflected on his own interactions with citizens over the years. He had stopped countless people, sometimes judging them unfairly or acting on assumptions. Tonight had been different. Tonight he had been confronted by the consequences of assumptions and the importance of acknowledgement. Marcus decided that he needed to speak with someone about the incident. He called his supervisor, Sergeant Lee, who was known for his wisdom and experience. Marcus explained what had happened, the stop, the revelation, and his feelings about the encounter. Sergeant Lee listened carefully, nodding as Marcus spoke. "Marcus," Sergeant Lee said finally, "the fact that you recognize the mistake is what matters. Everyone has moments where bias can creep in. The important part is learning from it and taking action to do better." Marcus nodded, feeling a mix of relief and determination. He knew that his words needed to match his actions. Reflection alone was not enough. He needed to implement the lessons he had learned and ensure that fairness guided every decision he made from now on. After the conversation, Marcus returned to his desk, his mind more focused. He began reviewing training materials on bias awareness and fair policing. He wanted to strengthen his ability to approach each situation objectively, ensuring that his judgments were based on facts and not assumptions. Marcus realized that this was not just about one encounter, but about shaping the way he served his community. As the night passed, Marcus patrolled the streets with a renewed sense of purpose. Every car, every pedestrian, every movement on the road reminded him of the lesson he had learned. Daniel Owens had shown patience and integrity, even when Marcus had initially allowed bias to guide his actions. Marcus wanted to honor that example by being better, more mindful, and more fair in every stop, every report, and every decision. By the end of his shift, Marcus felt a quiet determination. He understood that change was gradual and required consistent effort. The night had started as an ordinary patrol, but ended with a profound realization about fairness, respect, and responsibility. Marcus knew that the encounter with Daniel Owens would remain in his memory, guiding him to act with integrity and thoughtfulness. When Marcus finally parked his patrol car at the station, he looked at the city skyline in the distance. The lights of Brookville shimmered under the calm night sky. He felt a sense of hope. One encounter, one realization, could change the way he approached his work and his life. Marcus knew that the lessons of tonight would continue to influence him, shaping him into a better officer and a more thoughtful human being. A few days had passed since the night detective Marcus Reed had stopped Daniel Owens. The memory of the encounter still lingered in Marcus's mind, and every routine patrol reminded him of the lessons he had learned. He approached his duties with a newfound caution, awareness, and respect for every person he met. But deep down, he knew the true test would come when he faced Daniel again. It happened sooner than he expected. The department had scheduled a meeting to review recent internal protocols and community engagement initiatives. Marcus walked into the conference room, feeling a mix of nerves and determination. He had never attended a meeting with Daniel Owens in person, and now he would be sitting in the same room with the man whose patience and professionalism had left a lasting impression. The room was filled with other officers, supervisors, and staff. At the front, Daniel Owens stood calmly, reviewing notes on a tablet. He looked up as Marcus entered, giving a brief nod. Marcus returned the gesture, trying to steady the tension he felt in his chest. There was a quiet authority in Daniel's presence, a confidence built on experience and integrity. Marcus reminded himself that he had nothing to fear but everything to learn. The meeting began with routine updates and reports. Daniel spoke clearly and thoughtfully, outlining recent findings and emphasizing the importance of fair and respectful policing. His tone was firm but not harsh, and he engaged the team with questions designed to provoke careful thinking. Marcus listened intently, absorbing every word. The encounter from the night of the traffic stop replayed in his mind. He realized again how much composure and professionalism mattered in leadership. Finally, it was time for questions. Marcus took a deep breath and raised his hand. "Sir, I would like to address something that happened recently. It is personal, but I believe it is also relevant to our work as officers." Daniel nodded, his expression neutral but attentive. "Go ahead, Detective Reed, I am listening." Marcus recounted the night of the traffic stop. He explained the assumptions he had made, the initial judgment, and the shock of discovering Daniel's position as head of internal affairs. He spoke honestly about his feelings of embarrassment and guilt, and about the lessons he had learned since then. There was silence in the room for a moment. Daniel's calm gaze met Marcus's eyes. "Detective Reed," he said, "acknowledging mistakes is never easy. It takes courage to speak openly about them. I appreciate your honesty and your commitment to learning from this experience." Marcus felt a sense of relief, but he also felt the weight of responsibility. He was not just apologizing. He was promising himself and Daniel that he would act differently in the future. "I understand now how important it is to approach every stop with fairness, patience, and respect," Marcus said. "I want to ensure that my actions reflect those values consistently." Daniel nodded. "That is the right approach. Every officer has moments where judgment can be clouded. What matters is that we recognize those moments, learn from them, and take steps to improve. Your willingness to reflect is a positive example for others." The other officers in the room listened quietly, some nodding in agreement. Marcus noticed that the atmosphere had shifted. What had begun as a potentially awkward conversation had become a moment of shared learning. Daniel's patience and professionalism had turned a personal mistake into an opportunity for growth, not just for Marcus, but for the entire team. After the meeting, Daniel approached Marcus quietly. "Detective," he said, "I want to commend you for your openness today. It is not easy to acknowledge mistakes, especially in front of others, but what you did will have a positive impact." Marcus felt a genuine sense of gratitude. "Thank you, sir. Your approach has taught me a lot about patience and fairness. I will carry these lessons forward in my work." Daniel smiled briefly, a small but meaningful gesture. "Good. Remember, leadership is not just about making decisions. It is also about how we handle ourselves, how we respond to challenges, and how we treat others. You are taking the right steps." As Marcus walked back to his desk, he felt a mix of relief and determination. He realized that the encounter had changed him in ways he had not anticipated. It was not just about correcting a single mistake. It was about growing as an officer and as a person. Marcus understood now that integrity and respect were as important as any law or protocol. That evening, Marcus reflected on the meeting and the conversation with Daniel. He thought about how easily bias could influence actions, how quickly assumptions could cloud judgment, and how powerful patience and calmness could be in diffusing tension. He promised himself that he would approach every situation with thoughtfulness, fairness, and an awareness of the impact his actions could have. Walking through the quiet streets after his shift, Marcus felt a renewed sense of purpose. Each stop, each interaction, each decision was an opportunity to act with integrity and respect. He realized that the lessons from Daniel Owens extended beyond professional conduct. They applied to every aspect of life. By the time Marcus reached his car, the city lights reflected softly on the asphalt, and the night air carried a sense of calm. He knew the encounter and the meeting had marked a turning point. From this day forward, he would be more mindful, more patient, and more committed to fairness. Marcus started the patrol car and drove off into the night, not just as a detective on duty, but as someone determined to embody the lessons he had learned. He understood that true growth came from reflection, courage, and the willingness to change. The memory of Daniel Owens's calm authority and respectful guidance would remain with him, guiding him through every challenge and shaping him into a better officer and a better person. The following week, Detective Marcus Reed felt a renewed sense of purpose as he arrived at the police station. The lessons he had learned from the traffic stop with Daniel Owens and the meeting that followed were still fresh in his mind. He knew that acknowledging mistakes was only the beginning. True growth required action, and Marcus was determined to show that he could act differently in every situation. That morning, Sergeant Lee called Marcus into his office. Marcus entered, careful to maintain his professional composure. "Detective Reed," Sergeant Lee began, "I've noticed a change in your approach lately. You seem more thoughtful and measured in your decisions. I wanted to ask how you've been reflecting on recent events." Marcus took a deep breath. "Sir, I realize that I allowed assumptions to guide my actions during a stop last week. I stopped a man named Daniel Owens and I judged him unfairly. Since then, I have been reflecting on my behavior, studying training materials and making a conscious effort to approach every interaction with fairness and respect." Sergeant Lee nodded approvingly. That kind of honesty and self-awareness is rare. What matters now is applying that knowledge consistently. Use your experience as an example for others. Teaching through action is more powerful than any lecture. Marcus left the office with a renewed sense of responsibility. He knew that his actions could influence both the public and his fellow officers. He decided that during his patrols that day, he would focus on practicing fairness, patience, and clear communication in every encounter. As he drove through the streets of Brookville, Marcus noticed small moments that required attention and care. A delivery truck struggled to back into a narrow alley, and Marcus pulled over to assist. He directed traffic calmly, making sure the driver felt supported rather than criticized. The driver thanked him, and Marcus realized how simple acts of patience and respect could make a significant difference. Later, Marcus approached a minor traffic stop differently than he had before. The driver had stopped slightly past the white line at an intersection. Marcus calmly explained the situation, asking for the driver's license and registration in a respectful manner. The driver, a young woman, smiled and responded politely. Marcus saw the interaction as a success, not because of enforcement but because of the fairness and clarity he had shown. Back at the station, Marcus shared his experiences with a few trusted colleagues. He explained the methods he used to approach interactions with more awareness and patience. His colleagues listened carefully, asking questions and reflecting on their own practices. Marcus realized that by modeling fairness and calmness, he could encourage a culture of professionalism within the department. That afternoon, Marcus received a call from Daniel Owens. "Detective Reed," Daniel said calmly, "I wanted to follow up and hear how you have been applying the lessons from our last encounter. It is important to maintain accountability, even with ourselves." Marcus felt a mix of pride and humility. "Sir, I have been focusing on fairness and respect in every stop. I have been mindful of assumptions and made an effort to approach each person calmly and clearly. Your guidance has made a significant impact on how I conduct myself." Daniel's tone conveyed approval. "Good. Remember that consistency is key. Growth comes from repeated effort. The work we do is not just about enforcement, but also about trust, integrity, and service. I am pleased to see that you are committed to these values." After the call, Marcus reflected on the conversation. He understood that redemption was not about erasing past mistakes, but about learning from them and taking concrete steps to act differently. Every interaction, every decision, and every moment of reflection contributed to building trust with the community and respect within the department. That evening, Marcus attended a training session on bias awareness and community engagement. He participated actively, sharing his experience with the traffic stop and discussing strategies for fair and respectful policing. Other officers appreciated his honesty and willingness to learn. Marcus realized that leadership was not only about rank, but also about setting an example, encouraging reflection and fostering growth in others. As the training ended, Marcus stepped outside into the quiet night. The city streets glimmered under the soft glow of the streetlights. He felt a sense of fulfillment and purpose. He had taken the lessons from a single encounter and applied them in practical ways, impacting both his work and the people around him. Driving through Brookville, Marcus noticed the small ways his approach had changed. People responded to him with more trust and cooperation. Officers observed his calm demeanor and measured decisions. Marcus understood that redemption was a journey, not a single moment. Each choice he made reinforced the values he wanted to uphold. By the time Marcus returned to the station at the end of his shift, he felt a quiet sense of accomplishment. He had transformed a moment of personal error into an opportunity for growth, learning, and leadership. The guidance of Daniel Owens and his own commitment to fairness had allowed him to approach his duties with integrity and thoughtfulness. Marcus parked his car, taking a moment to reflect on the week. The city was quiet, but the lessons he had learned were loud in his mind. He understood now that the work of an officer extended beyond law enforcement. It was about setting an example, building trust, and acting with integrity in every decision. As he walked toward the station, Marcus felt confident that he was on the right path. Redemption was not about proving himself to others. It was about proving himself to his own conscience and living up to the standards he valued. The journey was ongoing, but Marcus knew that each day offered an opportunity to act with fairness, patience, and respect, shaping him into the officer he aspired to be. The next morning, Detective Marcus Reed arrived at the station earlier than usual. He wanted to use the quiet hours before the shift to think about the past few days and the lessons he had learned. The streets outside were calm, and the station had only a few officers moving about, preparing for their day. Marcus appreciated the silence, the way it allowed him to focus without distractions. He sat at his desk, opened his notebook, and began to write. He documented the traffic stop with Daniel Owens, the conversation at the meeting, and his own thoughts since then. Writing had always helped him process events, but this time the notes were different. They were not just about facts. They were about understanding his own actions and mindset. Marcus thought about his initial assumptions. He realized how quickly he had judged Daniel based on appearance alone. The thought made him uneasy, but he knew that acknowledging the mistake was the first step toward change. Marcus understood that awareness alone was not enough. He needed to turn awareness into action, ensuring that every interaction with the public reflected fairness and respect. He reviewed the training materials he had studied the day before, focusing on bias awareness, effective communication, and community trust. Every page reinforced the idea that law enforcement was not just about rules but about relationships. The trust between officers and the community depended on fairness, patience, and understanding. Marcus realized that his approach to policing needed to balance authority with empathy. During his patrol that day, Marcus paid close attention to the people he encountered. A delivery driver stopping at a corner store, a group of teenagers walking home from school, and a mother pushing a stroller all reminded him of the diversity and humanity in the community he served. He thought about how a single moment of judgment could impact someone's life. The memory of Daniel Owens's calm demeanor and words about fairness and trust guided him as he interacted with each person. At one point, Marcus pulled over a car for a minor traffic violation. Instead of assuming the worst, he approached with respect and a clear explanation of the reason for the stop. The driver, a young man who looked nervous, responded calmly. Marcus felt a sense of relief and pride. He realized that acting with fairness and patience did not weaken his authority. It strengthened it. People were more willing to cooperate when they felt respected. Later, back at the station, Marcus spoke with a few colleagues he trusted. He shared the lessons he had learned and encouraged them to reflect on their own actions. Some officers were surprised by his openness, but others appreciated it. The conversation sparked thoughtful discussion about the importance of fairness, awareness, and patience in policing. Marcus realized that personal growth could influence others and create a positive ripple effect throughout the department. Marcus also thought about his family. He wanted to be a better example for his younger brother, who admired him but sometimes heard stories about unfair treatment in daily life. Marcus understood that the lessons he learned as an officer could also shape his personal life. Treating people with respect, acknowledging mistakes, and learning from them were principles that applied everywhere. By evening, Marcus felt a growing sense of purpose. The reflection had helped him see the bigger picture. Policing was more than enforcing laws. It was about building trust, ensuring fairness, and serving the community with integrity. He knew that mistakes were inevitable, but the key was to recognize them, learn from them, and make better choices in the future. Walking through the quiet streets after his shift, Marcus noticed the city in a new way. The streetlights illuminated families walking together, friends meeting at cafes, and workers heading home after a long day. Each scene reminded him of the responsibility he carried. His decisions could affect people's lives in ways big and small. Marcus promised himself to approach every situation with thoughtfulness, fairness, and care. That night, Marcus returned home, sat quietly in his living room, and reflected on the past week. He thought about Daniel Owens again, about the calm authority and professionalism that had made such a strong impression. Marcus realized that true growth required humility, self-awareness, and consistent effort. He had taken the first steps, but he knew the journey was ongoing. He also thought about the role of leadership. Daniel Owens had shown that leadership was not only about authority or power, it was about guiding others through example, patience, and respect. Marcus understood that he too could influence others by embodying these qualities. He wanted to lead by example in his patrols, interactions with colleagues, and engagement with the community. Before going to bed, Marcus made one more note in his notebook. He wrote about his commitment to fairness, awareness, and integrity. He reminded himself that every stop, every conversation, and every decision was an opportunity to act with professionalism and respect. Marcus knew that change would not happen overnight, but he felt confident that his efforts would make a difference, both for himself and for the people he served. As he turned off the light and looked out the window at the quiet city, Marcus felt a deep sense of calm. The night had started with a mistake, a moment of unfair judgment, but it had led to growth, reflection, and understanding. He knew that the lessons from Daniel Owens would remain with him, guiding him through challenges and helping him become a better officer, a better colleague, and a better person. The sun was rising over Brookville, casting soft light on the streets and buildings. Detective Marcus Reed walked into the station with a sense of calm and purpose. The lessons from the past week, from the traffic stop with Daniel Owens to the meetings and reflections that followed, had settled deeply into his mind. He felt more confident in himself and his role as an officer, knowing that change required patience, commitment, and consistent effort. Marcus began his shift by reviewing patrol routes. He noticed small details that he might have missed before: a delivery driver carefully parking, a group of children walking to school, and a man helping an elderly woman cross the street. Each observation reminded him that his work was not just about enforcing laws, but also about observing, understanding, and supporting the community. He resolved to approach every interaction thoughtfully, aware of the impact his actions could have. During the morning patrol, Marcus encountered a situation that tested his resolve. A driver had made a mistake at an intersection, cutting slightly across lanes. Marcus pulled the car over calmly, keeping his tone respectful and patient. "Good morning, sir. You crossed the lane line at the intersection. May I see your license and registration?" he asked. The driver looked nervous at first, but Marcus noticed how the respectful approach immediately changed the atmosphere. The man handed over the documents politely, and Marcus explained the correction without accusation or judgment. When the interaction ended, the driver thanked him sincerely. Marcus felt a quiet satisfaction. The incident reinforced that fairness and respect could strengthen trust and cooperation in every interaction. Back at the station, Marcus found a few colleagues preparing reports. He shared the story of the stop, explaining the techniques he had used to approach the situation differently. His colleagues listened with interest, asking questions about the best way to remain calm and fair during traffic stops and other interactions. Marcus realized that by sharing his experiences, he could help others develop the same awareness and mindfulness he had worked to cultivate. Later that afternoon, Marcus received a call from Daniel Owens. "Detective Reed," Daniel said, his voice calm and professional. "I wanted to hear how you have been applying the lessons we discussed. Consistency is essential. How are you implementing fairness and patience in your work?" Marcus smiled, a sense of pride mixing with humility. "Sir, I have been more mindful in every interaction. I approach each situation with patience, respect, and clarity. I focus on listening and understanding before making decisions. Your guidance has been invaluable in shaping how I perform my duties." Daniel's tone conveyed approval. "That is excellent, Detective. Growth is measured by consistent action. I am pleased to see that you are committed to these values. Continue this approach, and it will not only strengthen your work, but also positively influence your colleagues and the community." After the call, Marcus reflected on how far he had come. The traffic stop that had initially been a moment of judgment and bias had transformed into a turning point in his career. He understood that mistakes were part of learning, and redemption came from applying the lessons consistently. Every choice, every interaction, and every decision was an opportunity to act with integrity. That evening, the station held a community meeting to discuss neighborhood safety and collaboration with law enforcement. Marcus attended, engaging with residents and listening carefully to their concerns. He noticed how respectful communication fostered trust and understanding. People felt heard, and the dialogue was constructive. Marcus realized that the lessons from Daniel Owens extended beyond policing. They applied to leadership, community relations, and life itself. After the meeting, Marcus walked outside with a colleague. The streets were quiet, the city bathed in the soft glow of streetlights. Marcus thought about the journey he had been on, from an ordinary patrol to a moment of self-awareness, reflection, and growth. He knew that the changes in his behavior were not temporary, but would continue to guide him in the years ahead. He paused for a moment, taking in the calm night. The city felt different now. It was the same streets, the same people, but Marcus saw them through a lens of fairness and understanding. He understood the responsibility he carried and the positive influence he could have by acting with integrity in every situation. A week later, Marcus again saw Daniel Owens in the station. This time there was no tension, only mutual respect. Daniel smiled briefly and said, "Good to see you, Detective. I hear that you have been applying the lessons consistently. How are you feeling about your work?" Marcus returned the smile with confidence. "Much more focused, sir. I approach every interaction thoughtfully and fairly. I have learned that integrity and respect matter as much as rules and enforcement." "Your guidance made a lasting difference." Daniel nodded, satisfied. "That is the kind of growth that strengthens both the officer and the department. Keep leading by example. Actions speak louder than words." As Marcus left the station that night, he felt a profound sense of accomplishment. The journey that began with a simple traffic stop had transformed him. He had learned humility, patience, and fairness. He had turned a moment of error into an opportunity for growth, reflection, and leadership. Driving through the quiet streets of Brookville, Marcus observed the city with awareness and care. Each person, each interaction, and each choice became an opportunity to act with integrity. He knew that the lessons from Daniel Owens would remain with him, guiding him through challenges and helping him become a better officer, colleague, and person. By the time Marcus parked his patrol car at the station for the night, he felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The city lights shimmered, reflecting on the asphalt like tiny reminders of every lesson learned and every choice made with care. Marcus understood that moving forward required continued effort, reflection, and consistency. He felt ready to embrace every opportunity to serve with fairness, patience, and respect, confident that his actions could positively impact the community and those around him. The night air was calm as Marcus walked into the station. He knew that his journey of growth was ongoing, but he felt stronger, wiser, and more prepared to face every challenge. He had turned a single encounter into a lifelong lesson, one that would guide him for years to come. Marcus smiled to himself, knowing that integrity, respect, and thoughtful action were the true measures of a good officer.